As our participants join us, welcome. You're tuning into a Yale Alumni Nonprofit Alliance program on Hope for the Holidays with a terrific speaker from the Hartford Foundation for Public Giving. Is going to be on hand. I'm going to get off the line soon. I'm Rachel Littman. I'm the executive director. Thank you for joining us. I'm going to hand it over to Joellen Gray, who's one of the leaders of the YANA New England chapter. And we're delighted to welcome you, even though it's being hosted by YANA New England. We see we've got people joining us from all over the country. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it off to Joellen. Thank you.
Well, welcome everyone, and thank you very much, Rachel. Rachel missed the opportunity to give you an commercial advertisement about YANA. So I'll spend a moment just talking a little bit about YANA and what its goals are and how it helps you. Essentially, YANA is a group of nearly 8,000 Yale alumni, unified by a global mission of collaborating and working together to network and support social enterprise and mission-driven endeavors. YANA does this in a variety of different ways. Its goal is really to build community and to promote lifelong learning. In addition to that, we want to provide ongoing support for Yale students as they investigate career paths in nonprofits. And of course, we want to contribute to Yale and society. We are going to have a presentation this evening from Jay Williams. And in a moment, Michael Kurz is going to talk a little bit more about that. But afterwards, what we'd like to do is invite you to join us in a kind of holiday happy hour, a chance to get to know each other a little bit better and to recognize that this has been an extraordinary year, but one that we've weathered well and one that we want to leverage going forward with future programming. So as just a quick bit of background, this year, the New England chapter, which by the way is almost 800 people, put on a couple of key events. One was looking at the healthcare provider's perspective on the impact of COVID-19 early in the pandemic. We hosted that in April, and that was absolutely fascinating, including the head of bioethics medicine at Yale, as well as speakers on mental health, private doctors who had to adjust their practices, people who were, for example, orthopedists who suddenly had to work in the emergency room. It was a really stimulating and interesting look into a world that many of us knew nothing about. In June, we hosted a session on educational planning scenarios, how the return to school in the fall might be envisioned. And there we had speakers from charter schools in Rhode Island. Jeremy Chiappetta was with us. We had a Yale graduate who is the president of the Rhode Island community colleges. We had the associate provost from Yale talking about the return to Yale. And very importantly, we had the superintendent of schools from Hartford. And for those of you who joined us then, you will realize that our follow-up with Jay Williams was really driven by a deeper understanding of the diversity in Hartford, as well as the complexity of providing services in that very broad community. In August, we did a social happy hour, and in September, we hosted sent out a newsletter where individual members of the New England Leadership Committee talked about the impact of COVID-19 on different disciplines within the nonprofit world. And then finally in December, we did participate in the geographic networking session that National YANA hosted, which was really fantastic. And for those of you who joined us, thank you very much for that. As we look forward to 2021, we have two programs that I wanted to alert you to. One of those is talking about the role of technology in nonprofits and how the use of new technologies is helping people improve their service delivery in ways that were unexpected. And then later in February, we're going to be focusing on silver linings of COVID-19, things that people have done that became innovations that we hope will continue as a result of all of our adaptation to this unique world in which we have lived. And then finally, before I turn it over to Michael, I wanted to share with you some information about a Yale SOM program. So I'm going to share my screen for just a second. The Yale Philanthropy Conference. I know that many of you may know about this. It's completely hosted by students. It's done by the students at the Yale School of Management. This is its 15th year. And while it has always been an in-person event, and kind of expensive, if I do say so, this year, because of COVID, there's an opportunity to make this a broader event. And so it's, I believe, only $10, although they're looking for larger contributions. But importantly, it's going to be online, so many more people can participate. I encourage you to go to their website and take a look at the speakers. And that website, I don't know if you can see it on my screen, is the YalePhilanthropyConference.com. Let me see if I can make this a little bit smaller so that you can. There you go, YalePhilanthropyConference.com. And so, Michael, let me turn it over to you to talk a little bit about Jay Williams and what really prompted our decision to ask him to come this evening.
Hello, I'm Mike Kurz. I'm really pleased to join everyone tonight. I've typically been reluctant to schedule anything in December because of the many calls on people's time. It is extremely encouraging that we had a very large registration for tonight's program. This is the second YANA program of the day. An earlier program on the arts, I understand, had close to 102 people participating, and I think it's an indication of how important the not-for-profit world is to the Yale alumni participants in YANA and those individuals who join us in these programs who aren't necessarily even Yale related. We welcome people from outside or with no connections to Yale in our programs, with the notion in mind that we would endeavor to share our connections in the nonprofit world and our skills that we bring to the not-for-profit world, and we have a very robust group of people who have stepped up to participate in events. We have been very fortunate, as Joellen was saying, to have people like the superintendent of the Hartford schools, people like Jay Williams, who is the president of the Hartford Foundation for Public Giving, which has stepped up year after year, but especially in these last few years to address the basic needs of people in multiple and varying ways. And I think what he can share with us about his experiences in serving the greater Hartford area through the foundation should be significant. Jay comes to Hartford by way of Washington, DC, and service in the Obama administration. And I think the significance of the Hartford Foundation for Public Giving is reflected in his interest and desire to come here and to be at the helm of the Hartford Foundation for Public Giving since about 2017. The foundation has both an arm that is a means of aggregating funds that are meant for philanthropic purposes, to supporting not-for-profits throughout the region, and providing leadership in the philanthropic world that we have here, and which we're all dependent upon across the country in lots of ways throughout the world. Tonight, our registrants include individuals from both coasts, an Alaskan registrant, New York, California, Maryland, Colorado, Connecticut, and the attentiveness to people to try to make the philanthropic world work better. And as the title of the upcoming program on philanthropy that the School of Management is doing, to reimagine it, because a program like tonight is an opportunity to do that. When Jay joins us, one of the things I am anticipating he will speak about is the vision for philanthropy as it's evolving in the COVID world that we have, and the post-COVID world that we can expect to reach, hopefully sooner than later. And the evening for me is an opportunity to think, why philanthropy? Why is it that we have this way of going about trying to serve people's needs? And I do recall when we had a safety net that we spoke about, that was thought of as a government supported safety net. I don't even know that that is there so much anymore, which means the importance of philanthropy is even greater than it has been for at least all the time that I've engaged in a world that is dependent upon philanthropy to a significant degree.
Michael, maybe we can talk a little bit with Jay about trends in philanthropy, and especially the shift to people donating online and the kinds of impact that that's had in terms of increasing the number of people who actually do participate, but also creating some of the problems on the back end where some of our institutions, like the charitable funds that people have, don't actually enable that as easily. And I'll give you a quick story while we wait for Jay. There's a charity that I support in Michigan that has a special promotion running with the Detroit Free Press right now. And they have the opportunity to gain $20,000 with a number of different contributions. So I wanted to make a gift, but the charitable fund that I have doesn't allow me to actually make a gift online. So fine, I made it out of my own pocket, no problem. But the point is our systems aren't supporting some of the trends that have been changing in philanthropy. And I'd love to hear Jay talk a little bit more about what those trends are and the kinds of impacts that he anticipates going forward as giving goes beyond charitable groups like the foundation and becomes more individual, reaching out to individual donors.
And at the other end of donations that you and I might make online are the donations being made by people like Mackenzie Scott and the philanthropic work that she does with the Amazon fortune that is at her command. There are people Mackenzie Scott amongst them, who have the ability to donate multi-millions, or in her case, apparently as much as short of 6 billion in this year alone. So there's a broad realm of giving that our nonprofits can draw on, and one of the topics we I think hope we'll talk about tonight is the drawing upon how do you draw upon some of those special donors, and how you draw upon the strength of the smaller donations.
Joellen and Michael, we had a question from Toddy she wanted to ask. Do you mind if I allow her to
Sure.
jump in? All right, Toddy, hang on a second. I'm going to allow you to talk. That should work. You want to give it a try?
And everyone, this is Toddy Turrentine. Toddy is also a member of the New England Yana leadership team.
Toddy, you should be okay to go if you're not on mute.
Okay, this is a very, very minor point, but as far as the technology and the ease of donating that Joellen addressed, I don't know how many times I've been asked for money. I have to say a lot of them were political, where if they had PayPal, I sat there and did it. If they didn't have PayPal, I said to myself, I'll do that later when I go, go find my purse and get the credit card. And I just think it's interesting how a lot of these organizations need to think from the donor's point of view in terms of ease of giving.
And again, that's really enabled by technology. So I think our presentation next month on technology, which by the way is timed to follow the Consumer Electronics Show, which is a major, major show about innovation and technology, will be really an important one as well.
One thing we should be sure to do before the evening is over, and I'll take the opportunity to do it now, is to encourage people, especially in the New England region, to let us know of any interest you have in a particular program or in the efforts of the New England chapter. We are extremely non-hierarchical. We have a leadership group that has self-nominated and really is the people from throughout New England who have stepped up to try to make the New England chapter our own, and to have programs that are particularly relevant from our vantage point to the New England challenges for not-for-profits.
We would, this is great. Rachel has just done a little poll here. Do you use donor-advised funds to make charitable contributions? Would be an interesting question to answer. We would love to have you join us. We have representatives from Yale College, the Divinity School, SOM, the law school, a variety of different colleges, but the more the merrier, the more diversity, the better. We would love to have some people from public health join us as well. So please just raise your hand and say yes, and we will reach out to you.
Joanne, I don't know if you guys can see the answers. We've got 85% of the people on the phone do not use donor advised funds, 15% do. I'm going to do another poll targeting recipients to see if there's what kind of donation forms you've received. I can tell you from Yana, we've started to see an uptick in donor advised funds, but you're right, it shows up as a check. And quite frankly, during COVID, when nobody's in the office, somebody's got to go track down and we've had some issues where it just something didn't get deposited for over a month, and because nobody picked up the mail or something. So yeah, it kind of works on all ends, but I'll ask that one next.
That's a great question, because with the change in the tax laws, it was actually more advantageous for people to bundle their donations and give a lot in a particular year and then maybe hold it back a little bit. So we have seen in the nonprofit I'm involved in a lot more money being donated from charitable funds, and also an inconsistency in when those are being donated. But that would be another great question, Mike, for Jay, is where is he seeing that trend coming from?
I think depending upon the size of an organization and depending upon the history of the organization, you do have I think the receipt of the funds through the donor advised giving happens just because people who support the particular organization do their donations that way. But the question of whether there is a credit card or PayPal option, the question of whether a organization has experience receiving donations of stock, for instance, are things that probably are pretty variable.
I also think it reflects the age of the donors. So I think that it would be interesting essentially to see how people donate, what age groups are donating to what causes, and whether or not that's equally distributed across different missions.
So I also wanted, as people, I just sent the question out for those of you who are answering from nonprofits about the kind of donations you are receiving. We are going to do a series of at least 1 or 2 programs next year about personal philanthropy for those who are in the position to make donations or to set up funds, or when to start making, saving some money. Everybody has their own personal views and means, but we're going to get into some of the details about donor advised funds and some other means. And for nonprofits, we might be able to do a program on setting up an investment account for early stage ones. I know it's tough you need a lot of oversight to set up a brokerage account, but it behooves us all to have as many means as possible to accept different kinds of donations, mostly of stock, which, as Joellen mentioned, there might be some other tax advantages depending on what people who have wealth want to be able to transfer that to causes. And if you, as a nonprofit, if you don't have a way to accept that, you might lose out on some of those. So we'll get into that next year as well.
I also want to thank Edward Sevilla for his comment to all of the panelists, showing that 70% comes from individuals, and foundations represent less than 20% of actual giving in philanthropy. Thank you very much for that. I know if Michael and I are looking like we're twiddling our thumbs a little bit, it's because Jay is due any minute here.
I'm the other part of the twiddling is one of the chat comments is deserving some attention. The question of what data we're all using or familiar with or should be familiar with is one of the things that I think is something that I know I'm interested in, and that is something that is probably going to drive the future of the more sophisticated efforts to raise money. So it's always impressed me how sometimes 12-year-olds can do a better job with lemonade stands at raising money than some of the not-for-profits that are struggling with the challenges. So one of the resources is that is highlighted in the chat is philanthropynetwork.org, and its information. There's another that is mentioned. And so I direct everybody's attention to the chat for some useful information about the subjects that we're talking about.
And there's a question to Edward. Do foundations include individual private foundations and donor advised funds at community foundations? And I know, Edward, you can't speak because we're on a webinar, but if you could type in your reply into the chat, that would be great. And for those of you who are working on staffs of nonprofits, I'm sure you have all of your fundraising plans in hand for the next few weeks. But one of the things that's so important, they're good.
I just gave him permission to go ahead, Ed, you can talk.
Hi, folks. Great to be with you all. As I said in the note, I think I'll check the Giving USA definitions, but I think the individuals' foundations are, the foundation line includes community foundations and also individual directed foundations. But I'll double check and put it in the chat. I just think, generally speaking, the Giving USA is to Michael's point about data sources, is a really powerful data source, and they've been tracking giving for 60 years now. So I just recommend that to folks on the panel. They've particularly checked giving trends since the last recession, for example, and as you're thinking about fundraising for your own organizations, it's just helpful. Your boards will find it helpful to use the data points.
That's great. That's great. Rachel, I would love to know how many people who are currently participating are actually on boards versus working in a staff's role.
Sure. Give me a second. I'll put a poll together and send it out.
That'd be great. Because some of us are thinking about what our behavior is like as donors, and others are wearing the hat of saying, how do I go out and raise that money? And then thirdly, there are people in programming, how do I spend that money? Be interesting to see how we all break out.
Joanne, I'm sorry, what's the distinction, people's roles at nonprofits?
Yes.
Okay.
How many, are they on a board? Are they volunteer? Are they a staff member? As we're waiting, I was just going to pass on some advice that I recently heard about fundraising. I think our invitation pointed out that 89% of all of the funds donated in December come on December 31st and December 30th. And as I was speaking with a development professional about just the email marketing in place for those 2 days, it is not terrible to actually put 3 different emails in place on the 31st. People actually regard that not as annoying, but as helpful in making sure that they make their donations on time.
Yeah, I appreciate everybody's starting to answer. I may not have gotten all the optional roles, so maybe just pick the ones that are most closely aligned with your current role. We're kind of doing this on the fly just to kind of get a sense of people's there.
And also Toddy has just recommended that we enable Karen Brown to speak if she's willing to, while we're waiting for Jay, so that she can tell us what she's seen at the Fairfield County Foundation.
Sure, and then I think Zelda, just also mentioned something in the chat. So Karen Brown, I'm going to allow you to talk. Please go ahead.
Hi. I don't know if you can see me, but we are seeing lots of donations coming into donor advised funds that already exist at Fairfield County's Community Foundation. I said in the chat, and I hope you'll ask Jay this for his opinion, but donor advised funds that are at community foundations really look and feel different than donor advised funds at the commercial gift funds, such as Fidelity and Schwab. We actually encourage our fund holders to make grants. We give them grant making opportunities. We partner with them where we'll put in a certain amount of money to support an organization and ask them to contribute so that we can make a larger gift. We're very proactive in working with our fund holders. And I think that that really distinguishes us from the other DAF providers, such as the commercial gift funds. So I wanted to just make that distinguishing comment because that's often not understood. We are seeing now also a lot more gifts coming from IRAs. And those can go to a direct nonprofit or to any fund at a community foundation with the exception of a donor advised fund. So giving is definitely up from IRA funds in many cases because those IRA funds have really grown and individual IRA holders want to use those assets for charitable giving. And community foundations are equipped to help with that as well.
That's great. Thank you so much for that insight.
So I'm very pleased to have the opportunity to point out that Jay Williams of the Hartford Foundation for Public Giving has joined us. It is President Williams, and I could introduce him as the former Assistant Secretary of Commerce Williams. I could introduce him as the former head of the U.S. Economic Development Administration Williams. I could introduce him as the former Deputy Director of the White House Office of Intergovernmental Affairs Williams, or former Mayor Williams. We are pleased that he came to Hartford, which is to serve the greater Hartford area, which is where I am coming from tonight and have been situated myself since 1987. I've always been incredibly impressed by the steps the Hartford Foundation has taken to focus on basic needs, such as homelessness, basic needs driven by the hurricanes that hit places far away from Hartford, but had effects in Hartford. I continue to be impressed by his leadership in the philanthropic community. And I welcome him here tonight on behalf of Jana. I should share with you that your name, I think, in the program announcement led to people signing up for the program from places as varied as Alaska, California, Maryland, Colorado, Ohio, Connecticut, Massachusetts, Maryland. So thank you for joining us. I was very pleased that on very short notice you were able to fit us into your schedule. So thank you very much.
Well, Michael, thank you for the wonderful and kind introduction. Sorry I'm a few minutes late, but I certainly appreciate it. And you were very generous in your introduction, having spent a number of years in public service now, at elected office. As you can imagine, I've been called to or referred to by a lot of different names, some of them less complimentary than others, but that's just the part of being in public service. But I am enjoying my family and I being here in Connecticut, in the greater Hartford region, and certainly an opportunity, still being relatively new, to engage organizations and associations and individuals that are engaged in philanthropy. So truly, I am excited to be here, and thank you for the invite.
Thank you. Let me start out by asking you, since you've offered to field some questions with some of the background. What is the Hartford Foundation for Public Giving?
Great question. So the Hartford Foundation for Public Giving is a community foundation, which is a form of We often hear of corporate foundations, family foundations, private foundations. We are a community foundation, and as such are defined by a geographic territory that we serve. Ours happens to be the 29 communities in central Connecticut, Hartford County and the surrounding towns. We are in our 95th year of existence. We are one of the oldest community foundations in the country, not quite the oldest, but one of the oldest. The Cleveland Foundation is the oldest. We are the largest community foundation in the state of Connecticut, and as such do, however, cooperate very nicely and collaborate with our fellow community foundations across the state. Connecticut is a little bit unusual in that there are actually 15 or 18 community foundations across the state of Connecticut. The large three are ourselves, Fairfield, I think Karen was mentioned, Fairfield Community Foundation and New Haven, and then there are a host of others, unlike some other states, Vermont, New Hampshire, where there is one community foundation for the entire state. But we are a philanthropic organization. The donors entrust us with their resources. We invest and shepherd those resources for the good of the community, focused on the mission and the strategic focus that we have. And just pleased that we have been around for as long as we have. And our work would not be possible without our donors, of course, but also without the nonprofit partners that we have in the greater Hartford region.
Give us a sense of what some of the highlights of your years at the helm of the foundation has brought.
Well, there have been a number of highlights, notwithstanding the fact that we find ourselves, still in the throes of, and hopefully at the latter stages of a global pandemic. Coming to the Hartford community has been such a rewarding experience for my family and I. And I say that because when the administration was ending in Washington, D.C., the previous administration, the Obama administration, we were contemplating perhaps going back to Ohio, looking at a number of opportunities. And the board of directors at the Hartford Foundation was engaged in the search for the next CEO. My predecessor, Linda Kelly, who many of you may know, had done a wonderful job, had been here for 11 years and announced her retirement. And the board of directors was looking to build on the great work that Linda had done, and at the same time, take the foundation in a new direction, to be more nimble, to be more impactful, to lean into the work in new ways as we looked across the landscape and saw that the region was changing and the region was evolving. And this is prior to any of us really, uttering the words COVID-19 or the coronavirus or global pandemic. We knew that there was change underway that we needed to respond to and actually be proactive. So it was an opportunity to come lead an organization that was already venerable in its work and its reputation, but to lead its transformation and its evolution. And the staff and the board of directors and the stakeholders, we have been on this journey for the past 3.5 years, and we were planning a number of things to put the finishing touches on it come 2020 and to emerge as this organization that I think that we are aspiring to be. And then March 2020 comes and we find ourselves in a world that has been upended. And I will tell you that the things that we were measuring in quarters or months, we then began to start measuring in weeks and days. And out of this pandemic, we have emerged as a more resilient, impactful, nimble organization. And I couldn't be more proud of finding that silver lining, or I should say being a part of the team, the staff that found that silver lining, and the board. And here we are today, still, here to serve the community, but also excited about what the future holds for this organization and our partners.
How do you see the role of philanthropy evolving in this economy as we continue to see the effects of COVID-19?
That's a great question. And in fact, we are looking at this through the prism of dual pandemics, the COVID-19 pandemic that has gripped all of our attention. But about 1.5 years ago or 2 years ago, we committed ourselves to a strategic focus of addressing the systemic and structural inequities that exist in this community, in this country, but certainly in this community, and those that are so unfortunately anchored in race, place, and income. So on top of the COVID pandemic, we have the longer standing pandemic of structural racism. And as a philanthropic organization with a mission to put philanthropy into action, to create lasting solutions resulting in vibrant communities, we believe that we have an obligation to, and as we've started describing it, do our part to help dismantle the structural racism and inequities and increase social and economic mobility. And in doing that, this COVID-19 pandemic has laid bare many of the inequities and disparities, particularly around employment and wealth building, economic opportunities, amongst a whole host of other things. And we believe as a philanthropic anchor institution that we can invest and deploy our resources in a way that is data informed, that is outcome focused, and that positions us as a bulwark against some of the forces that have just seen deep inequities worsen, that have seen underserved, overlooked communities be disproportionately and adversely impacted. So we've got some priorities in terms of helping to try to close the wealth and employment gap, to try to create higher opportunity neighborhoods, to, as you've talked about earlier, address the basic human needs, recognizing that while many are suffering, not all are suffering to the degree that some of our underinvested communities are. So as a leader, being willing to weather some of the criticism, but fulfill the obligation we have. And by and large, the response from our donors has been, this is exactly why they entrust us. This is exactly what they hope and aspire and expect us to do. And as a result, we know that we can't do this alone, but that's, we think, a role that philanthropy can and should be playing, particularly us as a community foundation positioned in this region.
I see the foundation has recently made some significant grants to foundations aimed at Black and Hispanic communities in the greater Hartford area. What can you tell us about other ideas of work that nonprofits can do to further the same goals? Because it's something that a lot of people have prioritized, just like you, but there's no simple answer that I think has been put out there how to go about doing this.
That's a great question, because there are no simple answers to this. This is a complex, entrenched problem that has been a part of our country for as long as we've existed. And let me be clear that we know that we have our own journey and our own work to do. We have come short and missed the mark in many regards in our own history. So we don't do this with the position of arrogance, thinking that we've got it all figured out. We do it from a position of humility. And with other nonprofits, we're not in a position to lecture, but what we want to do is help those nonprofits that believe that it is a problem that philanthropy and nonprofit organizations can do. We want to help build the capacity of those organizations that have greater insight, that have their own agency and their ability to address that. That's why we were so humbled and thrilled to be able to invest in organizations led by people of color who have lived experiences in the Black and the Latinx community about how again, they don't need a savior. We're not in a position to play savior, but what we are in a position to do is share some of the power that we have, that they can be the heroes of their own story, of their own narrative. And we think that other nonprofit agencies are eager to do that, but don't always have the financial resources that we have, and we realize how blessed we are in that regard. And also the capacity building. How can we use the tools that we have to be a convener, to advocate in the public policy arena? How can we use the tools that we have, the financial resources, to help build up other agencies so that we are creating an ecosystem for those organizations that think that it is important that we have more equitable opportunities, that it is important that we acknowledge the reality of the lingering effects of some of the policies of this country and the institutional challenges and barriers that existed many years ago, but still linger to this day. So in that regard, we see ourselves as a learning organization. We see ourselves continuing to evolve in this space. And To be frank, organizations such as this nonprofit alliance group are great partners to help inform and shape our thinking, to challenge us to do more, to call us out when we don't quite get it right, and to share with us, ideas and approaches that would continue to be effective and impactful in helping to really, bring greater opportunity to our community.
Hey, may I ask you a question? I just would like to understand, I know you've talked about some changes that you've made since you've come. Is that a shift in the types of organizations that you fund, or is that the fact that you've added new organizations and you're continuing to support the ones you did before? How are you approaching the problem?
Sure, and that's a great question. So it didn't start off with we need to support different types of organizations. Where we began was with a sort of a data scan and really evaluating and understanding what the data was telling us about the inequities, the challenges, opportunities that existed in our region. Looking at our mission and saying, listen, if we are going to be true to our mission, we can't ignore data that is telling us that there are significant, persistent disparities that just keeps large portions of our communities from engaging in opportunity. So that's where it started. And we're saying we are committing ourselves to try to negate and mitigate and ameliorate some of these inequities and these barriers. So then with respect to the organizations, it became those organizations that are also bought into that. We now want to support those organizations in their own journey, not telling them what they should be doing or how they should be doing it. But if they are committing themselves to these priorities that we have, supporting them. By and large, that encompassed the significant number of organizations we were already supporting, but it also opened up the door for new organizations that perhaps did not have a pathway or did not see a pathway to working with the Hartford Foundation. And there were a very small number of organizations who perhaps did not see that as a priority for their organization. And our communication with them was, while we have supported you in the past, if you don't see this as an important priority, we probably do need to re-examine and might shift how we've related to them. So it wasn't cutting the knees out from any of organizations that we supported for a long time, but if they just did not see this as a priority, we did say to them that it was likely that the funding relationship or the interaction might change. But that has been probably could count on one hand with many fingers left over, organizations that didn't see on their own accord how these priorities were amenable to what they were doing.
Thank you.
I want to get back to the topic of data in a moment. I also want to take you up on talking about some of the other I'll say trends that you are confronting now, foreseeing down the road, besides the diversity, equity, equality, which I know is a high priority for the foundation.
So, Karen, I think when I came on was talking about the movement toward the donor advised funds. I believe Karen was making this, I believe it was Karen, and the distinction between the large commercial DAFs and Fidelities of the world and community foundations. And she was absolutely right. I couldn't have said it better, that the DAF holders that we have aren't individuals who are seeking to park large sums of money for indeterminable amounts of time. These are individuals who want to see that money put to use, and we support that. More and more, we're seeing that individuals, while endowments still have endowed funds still have a very important role to play, they are more interested in some of the current use funds. How can we deploy our resources and our philanthropic gifts to see impact right now in our lifetimes, in much shorter periods of time, in the 3 to 5 year window or the 1 to 3 year window. As we think about becoming more and more relevant, people aren't waiting until they establish a certain net worth or a certain age or a certain stage of their career before they start thinking about philanthropy. You know, there was an old commercial that said, "This isn't your father's Oldsmobile," many, many years ago. I'm sure I'm dating myself. So, you know, the Hartford Foundation has been around 95 years, but we want to be as relevant to, you know, 20-something-year-old individuals who are coming into their own, you know, view of life as we were to perhaps their grandparents. We don't want to be, oh yeah, that's the place that, you know, our grandparents left money and have gone on. So the trend there is really, how do we become more, you know, relative or relevant and cognizant of the desire to be impactful, which also, you know, takes us into arenas with respect to some of our advocacy work and things like that. So, you know, those are very much trends, and I always viewed, or often viewed when I came, the greatest threat to the community foundation wasn't whether or not we would have, you know, resources. We're going to manage those resources as we're obligated to do as good stewards and fiduciaries, but were we going to be relevant? Were we going to be seen as dinosaurs, as organizations that just weren't able to evolve and be impactful with the current view of our donors? And I think that, again, a lot of that has been through partnerships and collaboration. I give a significant nod to our staff. We have staff that span the generations from those in their, you know, in their 20s to generations beyond that. And it's an active, talented, passionate group that I think collectively, along with our board and partners, help us think through some of these trends and how to adapt appropriately.
For organizations now that do not receive support from either the Hartford Foundation or the community foundation in their community, what do you recommend as far as bringing their needs to the attention of a Hartford Foundation?
Great question. We say everything starts with a conversation. What used to be a face-to-face conversation, now a Zoom conversation. It costs nothing but a little bit of time, and we think that, and we've continued to underscore to our staff that, and we heard this early on, that sometimes there was a perception that the Hartford Foundation had, you know, you had to achieve a certain hurdle in order to have the conversation started. It felt like if you just could navigate the labyrinth, you would then get a conversation. And we said that that is the exact opposite of what we want to appear. We want the conversation to start with open arms, open ears. If ultimately not every conversation results in a funding relationship, but we want organizations to walk away with something of value, that they had a conversation that was substantive, that they clearly had their ideas or needs recognized and acknowledged, and you know, then were able to move on, whether it is because it ultimately resulted in funding or some other technical assistance from the Hartford Foundation, or a path of information to further evaluate or develop that. So, you know, it is simple, but it is often overlooked that we are open to conversations with all organizations that see their mission and our commitment to our strategic priorities aligned. And, you know, from the newest staff member to, you know, the most senior in the organization, we continually say that these conversations are the lifeblood of us establishing new relationships, reaffirming existing relationships, course correction when necessary, and the, you know, the blessing of the curse of this remote posture we're in. We can have a lot more of these conversations with a broader audience, you know, through the use of technology. Now, you know, nothing, in my opinion, replaces still the face-to-face dynamic and interaction. But while we can't responsibly and safely do that now, we have made use of a technological platform for wider outreach, that even a year from now, hopefully, when, you know, there is widespread vaccination and this is becoming a distant memory, these COVID times, we will still utilize some of these approaches through technology to facilitate those conversations, so that any and all organizations that have good intentions about this community and see their mission and our mission aligning, feel welcome about having a conversation with the Hartford Foundation.
What kind of support are grantees coming to you for, especially now?
So we have seen the support, not surprisingly, 6 months ago, it was the acute nature of COVID, food insecurity, just, trying to wrap their minds around what had become of this community, which is where our COVID response fund played a huge role. Where we are seeing now organizations come to us is, general operating support, how to keep the doors open, not just for the sake of keeping the doors open, but to continue to providing service. There is a move that organizations are starting to look a little bit further into the future. When I say a little bit, maybe they're looking at the next 3 to 6 months. They're not doing year or 8 or 18-month planning, but it's not the day-to-day that it was 6 months ago early on. Can we just keep the lights on? Are we going to exist in a week or two? So how they are thinking about, positioning themselves in a post-acute COVID world, whatever that might look like, knowing that it is more likely now in front of us than it was 6 or 8 months ago. So that operating support, we've had some organizations come to us about thinking about now, their ongoing existence as a individual entity is in question. So might there be some strategic mergers that are at play as a result of this? That's a lot of it. So as we prepare for 2021, we are still keeping open our COVID response fund, but also starting to think about, stability and recovery for so many of the organizations. And, as fortunate as we are with the resources that we have, it still pales in comparison to what the need is and will likely be, because there's going to be a lagging effect from this. Even as the stock market, hopefully continue to do well and we start to see economic recovery, we know that this has been an unequal economic recovery, as most are, but this even more so, that whether it's the eviction wave that is, pent up, or any number of other things, we still are wanting to position ourselves to be ready to address those things.
How are donors responding to the overtures you're making to them, and to the need you see is being brought to your attention, or that you see on your own?
Our donors this year, it is beyond words how generous they have been. We saw an increase in donations to the Hartford Foundation that was unprecedented in our 95-year history. We have taken in more donations than we ever have in the worst economic and health crisis in all of our lifetimes. And to think that there was a very legitimate concern about the impact of this pandemic on philanthropy and people who are very generous, but rightfully need to be concerned about their own well-being and the well-being of their family, their households and loved ones. They have dug into their resources and been generous beyond measure, and have been both inspiring to us, and many of them have said have been inspired by the work that we have done. So, this will be the largest record year of donations coming into the Hartford Foundation. Also, the largest year of, and more importantly, the largest year of resources that we're putting out into the community. And you just in March and April, you would have been rightfully skeptical and concerned about, how much money are we going to be able to get out into the community, and how much, will our donors be able to dig in, and they've opened their hearts and their resources in ways that are just, again, indescribable.
Getting back to the data question, what data and other sources should people interacting with the world of philanthropy know?
Great question. So, and I'm sure this is where, as a leader, I have always made it a point to be, if I'm leading the organization, you staff the organization with people who are smarter than you are. And I tell my staff, if I'm the smartest one at the table, then we got a problem. So my research and evaluation team on our website have highlighted, we've always shared this data, but they've highlighted and we've made significant investments in our research and evaluation function to put up front the data sources that we use. Data Haven is a well-known organization out of New Haven that provides significant data in terms of quality of life indicators throughout the state, but particularly we're focused on those quality of life indicators in our region. Many of the stats that are facilitated through both the state and federal government. So, as you can see, I'm not recalling off the top of my head, but if you go on our website, hfpg.org, hfpg.org, you will see an array and a plethora of data that we believe it is our obligation to share with the community that gives insight as to how we learn and how we make informed decisions. And we see that as an ongoing part of being a learning organization.
And as I learned early in college, look at the bibliography, and you have a good start on where you need to go. Looking ahead, what might you suggest nonprofits think about in terms of, I'll call it COVID triaging, taking into account today's economy, tomorrow's economy?
That's a great question. That's the perfect term, triaging. We cannot be all things to all organizations. No organization can, and organizations that try are going to fail miserably. They're going to do a disservice to themselves, to their stakeholders. Triaging in the medical profession is absolutely necessary. It's difficult decision-making. When you've got a range of problems and injuries, and trying to figure out which is more severe, it can be very subjective, but it is absolutely necessary. And I think going forward, the need to be flexible, the need to really think about collaboration in a different way. I realize nonprofits are passionate organizations with boards and staff who are doing great work, and often shoulder to shoulder with other similarly situated organizations. We saw a good example. The Connecticut Food Bank and Food Share, the state's two largest organizations with respect to fighting and ending hunger, are in merger talks. Previous to this, they sort of had the state divided up, but without question, I'm sure the effects of this pandemic have brought those two very large, highly regarded organizations to the point of thinking, is it best to do this as two separate organizations, or are there economies of scale? And that doesn't mean mergers are always the right answer, but you have to put everything on the table. You have to be willing to challenge yourself, to look introspectively, to know that the world as it existed on January 1st, 2020 is not going to be the world as it exists January 1st, 2021, 22, 23, 24, 25. There are some fundamental changes that I think are going to be with us for ever as a result of this pandemic. And when you think about nonprofits, the most fatal thing you can do, I think, is sort of just kind of wait till things return to normal. If you define normal as the years and the times prior to March of this year. So there will be a new normal, but the new normal will be inherently different than the normal as we saw it less than a year ago.
One of the problems that I'm aware of that nonprofits, especially in the human services area, especially when supported by substantial Medicaid funding or other government health funding, have in common is many of their employees are paid at very minimal levels. How much should the nonprofit community be concerned about taking on the roles that government used to play as a provider when the funding is not always what is really necessary to pay people what they should be paid.
Philanthropy, nonprofits cannot, should not take the role of government. There is absolutely an obligation and a role for the public actors. Having spent significant time at the local government level, significant time at the federal government level, government rightfully in many instances gets a bad rap. It can be inefficient, bureaucratic, but that being said, there are obligatory roles that are the purview of government, and when philanthropy seeks to displace that, it is does not end well. Nor does it end well when government steps into roles that aren't best suited. That being said, there is a synergistic relationship that does exist, a complementary relationship, an enhancing relationship, but governments literally can print money. There's fiscal and monetary policy, and I know with that comes the politics that we are often paralyzed by. But there isn't enough money in philanthropy to play the role or to step into where government falls woefully short or abdicates its responsibility. I think pushing, challenging, advocating is necessary. Being able to work in partnership with, but this has been a concern within the state of Connecticut that the nonprofits, they are providing a service to government, which is fine for government to contract with those nonprofits to provide certain services. But in doing that, they need to be adequately and appropriately compensated. It needs to reflect the cost of business. You can't have a contractual relationship, a productive contractual relationship with suitable outcomes if the true costs or the inflationary costs that accrue aren't addressed as a part of that relationship. So, the group of nonprofits were making what I think is a very legitimate call to the state government of recognizing the vital role that they're playing, the vital role that they're filling on behalf of government, which again is appropriate because that's not taking the place of, that's a sort of a fee for service. But there has to be appropriate recognition of the inflationary costs and pressures, and it has to work on both sides. So in that regard, nonprofits play a critical role, but when it comes to trying to step in for what is a governmental role, I've never seen that work out well.
Let's talk about donors for a moment. What things can individuals do to be, I'll say, more effective donors?
Listen, we are humbled by the fact that people are donors or philanthropic. So how I would answer that is, I think we have a charge to try to inspire donors. There are many donors who know exactly what they want to do, how they want to do it. And if we can be a conduit for that, that's exactly the role we play. There are other donors who say, educate, inform me, inspire me, tell me what you're thinking. And for those donors, we absolutely want to fulfill that role. And then there are donors all in between. So being a curious donor, being a donor that, if open to, examining and challenging the organizations that you are giving to are always welcome. But I will take if you want to call I don't want to say an obstinate donor, but I mean, if a donor has their mind made up and this is what they want to do, we're going to figure out an appropriate way to try to accommodate that. If we can't, we still want to have a relationship that provides perhaps a future opportunity. And then for those donors that say, hey, I'm ready to go, but I want to be inspired by what you're doing, we need to have a constant, number of opportunities to show that donor, not that you have to tie yourself into a pretzel to accommodate or to interest a donor, but you want the work that you're doing to show how that's relevant and connected to the interests of those respective donors.
So I see that the foundation has a podcast called Disinvested.
Yes.
Why disinvested?
That's a great question. So again, the talent of our staff in so many ways, trying to describe what has occurred in our community over the past several decades, not to be dystopian or pessimistic, but to really grab one's attention in one word, or, in this instance, one word about, the challenges that are before us. But if you, and hopefully people, your group will, if you listen to the podcast, don't let the title belie what the podcast is really about, talking about solutions and approaches to counter that disinvestment, whether it's the financial disinvestment or the disinvestment in any number of ways. It is really about a way forward. It's about how we think about where we are in this community. And while there are challenges, I'll tell you that there are still significant assets and opportunities. I'm from Youngstown, Ohio, my hometown, and Youngstown and Hartford, the regions have a lot of similarities, but I can tell you, having spent significant time in Youngstown and served as a mayor of Youngstown and then traveled the country as a part of the Obama administration, there are assets and opportunities here that other communities would be exceptionally envious of, even my hometown that I still love. So I think while, a lot of people from this area will point back to, the loss of some of the corporate leadership or some of the migration of population, all of which is true, it pales in comparison to other places. And the greater Hartford region and Connecticut writ large are well positioned yet still to move ahead and create places that are full of the quality of life and opportunity. Notwithstanding this pending snowstorm, that there's not much we can do about that. But other than that, to really position this state in our regions very well.
Oh, how do we fare in terms of the vitality of our community foundations compared to those across the country?
In my opinion, and I'm biased, I will acknowledge that up front, but pretty well. And I think that I alluded to the fact that Connecticut has several community foundations, and we have over the past few years been very intentional about working together and collaborating, particularly on issues that are of statewide concern. So the census, work together on that. The issues of the inequities that exist across the state, we've worked together on that. So, I'd say that we measure up fairly well against, other regions, particularly as it relates to the collaboration. Could we do better? Are we aspiring to do better? Absolutely, yes. But again, I'm always, sensitive to my experiences back in Youngstown. It was a family foundation in Youngstown that, to me, really stood in the Mahoning Valley, that really led the way with respect to how philanthropy can be transformative. And that was the Raymond John Ween Foundation that shifted and started investing and supporting community initiatives in a way that was transformative and in a model that to this day I still think is relevant, and even in my leadership of the Hartford Foundation seek to model in many instances. So I think we're doing well, and it's such that there's still a lot of road ahead of us. But I'm enjoying the opportunity to do my part as a part of a larger group of colleagues.
And I do want to let you know, on behalf of the New England IANA group, and I'm sure the same is true for our national IANA group, our purpose is to help take the talents and knowledge that runs through the alumni base that is Yale, that has been involved in nonprofit governance, been involved in nonprofit operations, been involved in nonprofit consulting, and share it. And if there are things where we can be of service to the foundation, please let us know. If there are things that you need help on, we're soliciting some input nationally would be helpful, please let us know. I was going to finish with a question about special sauces that was inspired by something Bob Patricelli who many people locally know, who is said to have commented based upon his experience with the Newman's Own Foundation, which is that suggestion that he makes to his nonprofit colleagues, that if they had a salad dressing, they could really be better off for having revenue streams of the sort. Is there any wisdom you can give us about special sauces and salad dressings and other revenue streams for nonprofits?
I'm not sure if it's wisdom, but I'll certainly share. First of all, let me say I appreciate the offer. We would be eager to take you up on that, and I would offer us also as a resource to the Yale Alumni Nonprofit Association as is ideas and partnerships. You know, Bob Patricelli, who I've gotten to know, you know, his wisdom and his experience, I wouldn't dare begin to, you know, try to add to that, but I will affirm this notion. And ironically, it's a program that we supported to create and facilitate a sense of entrepreneurship amongst nonprofits that absolutely is about helping them create multiple streams of income. And we had a cohort class, you know, again, I'm losing time here. It was either last year that ran into this year of nonprofits that went through a program that was almost, I don't want to say Shark Tank, but Shark Tank-like, where we, I don't know, it started off with 50 and then it was whittled down to 30 and then 20 and then 15 or 20 of them went through an intensive sort of boot camp with some consultants we brought in to monetize ideas they had to create a revenue stream to support and enhance, you know, what they get from their donors. And a number of them were quite successful in creating revenue streams, providing goods or services or, you know, other things. So, you know, it's ironic that is something that we supported within the past year or so, and those organizations, you know, if I name them, would be very familiar to those of you, you know, who are in the region. So yeah, that is something that we believe in, something that even for ourselves, you know, we are fortunate to be very well endowed and to have a significant amount of unrestricted resources, but we could always use and ourselves think about, are there other things we can do to create revenue streams? Because ultimately, if we're creating a revenue stream, it means more money going in to the community, not a revenue stream for the sake of us building our own reserves or resources. So yeah, I would you know, echo Bob Patricelli's wisdom. And you know, if there's a secret sauce or salad dressing or something that we stumble upon and can use it to enhance resources that we put in the community, we'd be all for it.
I think Joellen will have official thanks. I want to thank you personally for giving of yourself, for doing it on a very short notice. I started to say at the beginning that I usually don't avoid scheduling anything in December because people are pulled in so many different directions, and appreciate that you allowed us to pull you in our direction.
Absolutely. I've enjoyed it. It's been an invigorating conversation. I'm glad to have gotten to know the group. One of your members, Adam Cohen, I don't know if he's on, he said he was going to try, but he had a conflicting board meeting. So, you know, I'm sure I know some of the individual members. I look forward to an opportunity getting to know and interact with you all, whatever, however it would be. And I see Adam's name popping up, so he is here.
Yeah, he can. I just unmuted him. Adam, if you'd like to say a few words.
Hello, Jay. Great to have you on here. I heard all of yours because you came on at 6 and my meeting was at 5:30.
Yeah, I was a little bit late, so don't rub it in me there, Adam. I was supposed to be on at 5:45.
No, that's great.
Right.
We do have opportunity for questions. If anyone has any, if you want to just pop them into the Q&A and let us know, that would be great. I do have one for you, Jay, while we wait, which is there any thing happening in the state legislature at all that would affect community foundations? Anything that you're concerned about or watching? And I'm only asking you because I haven't paid any attention.
Yeah, and my staff, we have some staff members that keep an eye on that. Nothing that jumps out at me in the state legislature, but I will say that there has been and continues to be conversations in Washington, D.C. By a couple of, when I say critics, I don't mean that in a pejorative sense, but critics of the large commercial DAF model, the donor advised fund model, who are concerned and have pointed out instances of individuals who get an immediate tax benefit, obviously, for creating a DAF, but then don't distribute those funds in what they feel is a reasonable amount of time. And part of the challenge is that is not a pervasive problem in the community foundation world. And there's some concern that they are seeking to advocate in Congress a blanket, what they deem as a fix, that would draw us into the same boat as these large commercial DAFs for a problem that doesn't exist in any significant way for us. So, more recently, there's been some acknowledgement that DAFs and commercial DAFs and community foundations, this goes what Karen was saying, are different. Whether there might be legislation that recognizes that nuance, I don't know. But once something gets going in Congress, nuance is not what they do well. So, we're keeping our eye on that, and we'll, try to be proactive and respond accordingly.
That's great. Thank you very much for that. And I'm just checking to see if there are any questions. Only one, which was you referred to changes in the region in Hartford when you first came. I think you were referring to that. Can you just elaborate a little bit on what you saw as those changes?
Again, I've only been here for 3.5 years. So the changes that started obviously well before I got here, the changes in the economic landscape, the changes with respect to the our own evolution as a community foundation that for a long time was sort of generically could be defined as just being broad and doing as much as we could for the greatest number of organizations, and and at the same time internally we had a lot of silos. It was like we siloed ourselves. So those types of changes, the relationships between us and our other community foundations across the state, recognizing that the state saw its its fortunes shift, and again, a lot of these were trends that didn't start 3.5 years ago, but that became, I think, accelerated and more evident as the state wrestled with its it being still a small, relatively wealthy state, but seeing a lot of changes to the economic base, and those things ultimately trickle down to the communities. And in Connecticut, it is a state which was interesting to me. I came from a larger state where the cities played a very significant and dominating role, and the counties in Ohio. And here, there is no county government. The suburban, exurban areas play a more of an outsized role than the cities in places that I'm from. So getting used to that you've got Hartford, Bridgeport, New Haven, Waterbury, you've got a handful of what would still be considered small or mid-sized cities in the larger scheme of things, with a concentration of many of the state's issues, but that did not necessarily, even in and of themselves, collaborate. I came to find out, like, Hartford is a world and New Haven is a world. They're 30 miles apart or 40 miles apart, but it would almost be, they might as well have almost been worlds apart when it came to, and then Bridgeport, it's like, there's 3 or 4 separate islands of cities in a small state that you don't see. You see a lot of commonalities and challenges, but in my view, I didn't see a lot of commonalities and advocating and sort of joining together and lifting up one voice. So things like that were curious to me.
Interesting, really interesting. It's always helpful to have an outsider come and look, right?
Yeah, sometimes, and then sometimes you get like, what do you know? You're an outsider. unless you're in Connecticut, New England for a generation or two, you know, you're just you don't know what it is. But that's not you've been very welcome. So I and I'm also sensitive, having been a former mayor, I'm also sensitive of not coming in with a, you know, this is what you guys need to do. I've got my own. People will say, well, hey, why didn't you, if you're so smart, why is Youngstown still struggling? You know?
Well, thank you so much. This has been really, really interesting. I'm speaking on behalf of everyone to say it was really a wonderful thing to hear before the holiday, and gives us some chance to think about our giving in the next couple of weeks as well. For those of you who would like to continue the conversation, there's a separate Zoom networking event, and the link is in the chat box. And Jay, thank you. We hope that you and your family have a truly wonderful holiday.
And thank you again, and wish you and all of the members and participants a wonderful, prosperous holiday season. And I will steal one of the closing lines that my board member, David Roth, says. He says, in these times, stay positive and test negative. So hopefully that will be the key for all of you. And we wish you all well.
Great. Thank you so much for that.
Bye-bye.
All the best. Bye-bye.
Bye.